I'm gonna start by just telling that I'm not really that hungover. I actually got a sore throat. That's the reason for my voice. Hopefully, we'll be closing the door soon. Quick question to all of you. Could you raise your hands if you have anything to do with software development at all? Everybody, I guess. Or to change this, is there anybody in here who has nothing to do with software development? Okay. A couple of guys, thanks. Okay, so are you waiting for the next big release? I really, truly hope not. Because we've been trying over the last decade or so, 15 years, to get into Agile, and they're trying to teach us that we shouldn't be doing big releases. And if you were here last year and heard Gunnar Helguson from QuizUp, you would have heard that he said one of the 3 points he made, they shouldn't have tried to do a big release, but release frequently. So, and I even recently heard that Microsoft even said that they're not going to do another version of Windows, they're just going to update it with features. And that's what we want to do with software today. We want to update it as needed. Now, I'm going to open up my notes here, sorry. It's a little unprepared. So, what usually happens is when we start a project is that we have a product manager or a product owner, as I like to call him. He's the one with the hat. And then we have the team. Those are the 3 guys or the 3 people. And then we have a Scrum Master. That's our typical Agile or Scrum team that we have today. And what happens is, well, that he has an idea and he works with them together to create a product that they're going to deliver. And in these slides, I'm going to be using this box as the product. Now, a little clarification that whenever I say a release or a version, that's the same thing in this lecture. I'm just talking about something that will be delivered as a package. And I might be talking about Jira or Confluence. Please raise your hands if you know Jira or Confluence. Most of you do. That's good, because that's the tools that we use today, and that's actually the tools that I like to use in software development. On the program side, yeah. So what happens is that we have a release we're going to do. We have some end customer that we're going to give this product to. And we might even have some stakeholder also. And we might have another team that's dependent on this release. Everybody might be maybe not waiting for it, but they need it for some reason. Some of us are in teams that create products that they only give to other teams to build a more complex solution, which is the case that I currently work in today. And some of you just create simple solutions that you can give directly to your customer. And you can have many teams depending on you, and you can have many users, and you can have many stakeholders. You can have people from operations, people in finance, budget. There are all sorts of people that you need to communicate with. And what I've learned is the best way to do this is through releases, because everybody is expecting something from you, and what you should give them are actually releases. So, the reason that I'm here today is to get you a little acquainted with what I've learned and try to teach you and share with you what I've learned through the years doing this. And the team I'm in, the Honey Badgers, we had a retrospective a couple of months ago where we were discussing how pleased we were, and others even were pleased with how we are doing releases. And we thought, well, let's share this with everybody else in the company. But we didn't have time. You never have time to do stuff like this. So I saw an ad for the UTmessan, so I decided, well, maybe I can steal some time off my family at evenings and create slides and do a public show there that will be recorded, and then we can just show it to the other teams. So that's kind of the reason that I'm here. So thank you, Honey Badgers. So a little bit about me. If I happen to say release thinking or version thinking, that's the same term, and it's a term I use to encapsulate all this. That's just the box, get everybody thinking about the release, because I think it's really important for everybody who's working on something to know what we're talking about. Privately at home, I'm not a Scrum Master. I'm part of a big family, and if you need more details, you can find me on logihelgu.com. So, what usually happens, and I've had this happen to me many times, is that you start off in a team, and we decide one day, or the team decides, well, we have to deliver. Somebody asked for something. What are we going to deliver? Well, I don't know. When did we deliver last time? Well, it was 4 months ago. So the process starts where they're trying to figure out what they've done in the last 4 months, because there's nobody organizing this. There's no plan of releases, and there's no actually, the only thing you have are actually commits of your code. And I'm going to assume that when the developer commented his code, he had to add the Jira ticket with the commit. So what the team does, or somebody does, is go through all the commits and create a new release containing all those commits. So he's actually figured out these are the tickets that are in the version. And here I'm displaying them as small boxes. And this is very tedious, and in the end, the team doesn't know where they're going. They're just working and working until one day they decide to do something. And what happens next is, okay, we figured out what's in this. How are we going to present this to someone? How is somebody going to use this? We have to create some documentation. We have to have a manual of how this works, how to operate this, how to set it up. There's a lot of stuff that could follow, could be part of this. Design documents, mock-ups, wireframes. We have to create them now because we didn't do it when we were writing the code. And finally, when this has all been put together, we're going to put a number on it, or a name on it. In this case, 1.2.0, called BAM. Now, I really like to have numbers on it, and if you know samware.org, I really recommend it, especially if you have APIs. It's written for APIs. It says that you should have backwards compatibility, and you can't bump your major version being the first number, the 1. You can't bump that unless you're doing backwards it's not backwards compatible. But if we're doing product work, we might want to release new stuff with new numbers. So again, this is a conversation that tends to happen between product owners and a lot of people. And for those of you who know Java, you probably think you're working in Java 8 at the moment, I think, but actually you're working in Java 1.8 because they never talk about the major version. So, and regarding the name of the version, that's usually just gimmicks for better sell. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, you're going to have it in version BAM or 1.2. But in the end, it seems to me that we always fall back to the numbers. It's simpler to understand them. So the first thing that I'm actually going to recommend is that, number 1, you create a release plan. So you have a plan, and here we have just a line for time. We're going to release 1.2.0 at some time. And then we know, maybe tomorrow, that we have to release 1.2.1 because there's a minor fix that we have to add. And sometime in the future, we're going to create 1.3.0 with something new that somebody's waiting for. Maybe another team, maybe a new feature for a customer that we can release. Somebody wants something in the future. And we want this release plan to be visible for everybody. This is for the team to know what they are working on and why. They can always go to the release plan and say, okay, we're working on 1.3 at the moment because of this. We know what it's for. And we've been doing this, and we have a visual, for the honey badges, we have a visual release plan. And there we have a line that says current. And that what that actually tells you is that that's the last time that the PO updated the release plan. So I might open it today and it might be 2 months old, but at least I know when he updated it. And the next time he will update the current and change the releases accordingly. Because in our case, we have many, I think we have 10 plus products that we have to release. So it gets kind of complicated, but it's really nice to see what's the plan. And the team can go in there and say, okay, we're working on 1.2 at the moment, and after that, we're going to do some other product here, the gray box below. That's the reason we're not going straight to 1.3. And other teams and everybody else in the company can go in and see this quite visually, what the plan is and what they're working on and what the plan is for the next stuff. So the second thing I want to mention is groom often. The grooming meeting is just a backlog refinement. And what we do in the Honey Badgers is that we focus the grooming meetings on the versions. So we know today that we have released 1.2, we've released the latest version. So the next time we're going to meet up, we will most likely be discussing 1.3 for that particular product. We might be looking even further into the future. So before we go into a grooming meeting, we're going to talk about some requirements. We know in advance what the plan is. We're not just going there to look at the whole backlog. That's another meeting. We do those too. But it's much better to have them really focused, as small as you can. And again, you want to keep your releases as small as you can, because you want to release frequently to get feedback and make sure you're doing the right stuff. And in our case, we try to do them twice a week. But this is really dependent on the team being ready and the PO leading this work of getting everybody into the grooming meetings. You can also have a team where there are no grooming meetings. They're just trying to work at whatever they think is next. Let's imagine that I actually wrote an A there too, and it says readiness. I forgot one letter. I was doodling. Sorry, here. So at grooming meetings, we want to put some estimates, and we're hopefully going to learn something about estimates in the next lecture. But I want to share something that we do in the Honey Badgers is that we've actually come to the conclusion after our PO went to #NoEstimates workshop that we really don't need to be looking or discussing too much the user stories or the size of each item. I've been in numerous teams where you start by estimating from about 1 to maybe 40 points or something, then you move it down, and one day you say, well, nothing can be bigger than 8, or nothing can be bigger than 13, because we can't take in bigger chunks to work at. They just don't fit within our iterations. But what we actually figured out that, well, we're spending a lot of time trying to discuss, is this a 2 or is it a 5? Is it bigger than this? Is it bigger? In the end, it doesn't really matter, because all we want to know, can we do this one item in one iteration? The iteration might be a week or 2, it depends. So the only thing we need to know is this a 1 or is it not? If it's a 1, it gets a 1. We're going to do it in one sprint. We can't do it in one sprint or one iteration. Else, it's too big. At the moment, we just call it an epic, and we have to break it down into smaller chunks. So the estimations we do are just 1 or nothing. And for the team, this has really helped the team, because guess what? They don't like estimating. And I'm fine with that, because to me, estimating is just guessing the future. I can't. I don't know no one that can. It's just a wild guess. But it's an educated guess. And so what actually happens is that we have just the ones, and then we learn over time how many ones we can do in each iteration. But bear in mind, the size of the one is not discussed. It might take us 5 minutes. It might take us 5 days. This is just something we learn over time. So, the next thing I want to discuss is the release issue. What we've been doing, or the honey badgers have been doing, is that on every release, there's one ticket marked here in red that is just called release version 1.3.0, which means that if any of you want to follow up on this version and you have access to our Jira, we can just make you a watcher. You can watch this ticket, so you always know the correct status. And if we have a wiki page or a Confluence page, we can always link to this issue, and you can see there what's the status of this release task, which is really good for everybody to know, because otherwise you have to follow up and check the version, which is much more complex in Jira. And within this release task, we have a list of things that we want to do for the release. And this is something that we use as a template. We know that we have to close the Jira version. We have to make sure that all Jira tickets are closed. We have to update some documentation. There's a lot of tasks that have to be done to release things. And we managed to get them all into this task. And what actually happens is that some of them might not be done, but we still close it. But that's okay, because we might be delivering a first version API for some other team just to get started. So they actually get the API, they can start, and they can see on the released issue that there is actually no documentation. There is nothing in this except the API that they get. But it's written there in clear in the release ticket, so they know. And this, so we use this list. This is just, we use the description of the Jira ticket. Usually we have light bulbs on and off, if they're started or if they're done. So everybody can see this. And this is a template that we reuse. When we go off from, when we create the next version, which might be 1.4, we just clone the release issue from the last one. So if we improve it in any way, we know we have the latest update in the last one. The other day, we figured out that one of our products was missing. It should have been marked as should not delete in Bamboo. It was something that we had forgotten, so we just added that to the template for that product, and hopefully that will never happen again. So, a small discussion in the end about documentation. So in the release task, as I said before, we have links to all our documentation. We have product packaging that is linked to that, how to release, how to maintain, all the manuals, everything that you should need to know is in this one release ticket. So within that ticket, you know, because we found that, well, we might release something or deliver some software, but nobody knows where the documentation is, and they have to go over to Wiki or Confluence and find it. So by just having this one ticket in the release, you can always find it really easily. And there's another thing regarding Confluence or Wiki, that we don't want to copy all the documentation that we have for each version. We're actually supposed to do that in a way, but it gets really complicated if you have a lot of the same content in Confluence finding stuff. So what they do is they only have the current documentation in Confluence. If they have a new release, there is one item here on the list in the release task that says create the newest documentation export. So we go to the documentation and we find the current one and we export them as PDF. And that's so the links there are actually to PDFs. That actually means that we just have a snapshot of the latest documentation for this version. They're in PDFs, everybody can see them. We're not updating them. If something is wrong with the documentation, we will have to go in there and we will have to create a new release just to update the documentation. But we're just trying to take pride and ownership in the documentation and making it complete. And it really helps with not having too much content regarding the release in Wiki. So, hopefully I shed some light on what I call release thinking, and hopefully you're not thinking about big releases, and hopefully I inspired something to get everybody thinking about releases and get everybody else aboard on thinking about releases and release management. Are there any questions? Oh yeah. I draw them. I should have thanked my family for stealing time from them, and this is I used paper by 53, the app. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, very good question. So you were asking when we do the major and minor and how we decide on what version we're going to do. So so this is actually an excellent question because there's one thing I want to mention. Don't do version next. I've seen this in companies, okay, let's do this now, and then we move everything else to next. And then they just move everything to next. So that's just the same as saying we're not going to do next, we're going to do it something, just put it to the backlog. Just a small, related to this, don't do next. You should always try and do the minimum thing you can. That's always, as small as possible. And because usually releasing or getting stuff out there is usually hard. But that's another issue. You have to make that simple so you can do small things and get them out there. When we have grooming meetings, we usually have a plan. We might start with a grooming meeting saying, or requirements meeting saying, we have to do this stuff. How can we do it? Can we take just these things and release them? But a lot of this work has already been done by our PO before we get there. And then we're just refining it with him. Well, we should pull this with also, or skip this or something. So, and the minor and major, well, the patches, the last number, that's just hard fixes. Minor things you want to add, they shouldn't really matter. You have to do something, even the documentation. If we do something wrong in the documentation, we have to do a minor version. So, or patch version, sorry. The minor version are usually when you have something new. You're adding stuff to it. But the major version, if you want to follow somewhere and you have an API, you don't want to do on a major version unless you're breaking your backwards compatibility. But if you're doing in other kinds of products, if you have an app, you might want to say this is version 2, just because it's got new stuff in it. My personal experience, I like to bump it whenever I feel like it. I've bumped up from 2.5 to 2.7 just because we were using Java 1.7. Just for me to know, I know that the 0.7 one is the same as Java. For me, the product owner can decide anything he wants. As long as it's somewhere cleared out, somewhere stated in the documentation what it is and why, then I'm fine with it. And in the end, it's much simpler for us to talk about 1.7 and 1.6 and the differences than talking about code or features at a more detailed level. So this is a great tool for discussing versions on a high level. I hope that answered the question. Very good question. So the question was, if I had a new team today and I wanted to get it to the place where the honey badgers are, how would I get to that? This is an excellent question because we just lost our PO, which has been leading a lot of this work. So at the moment we have to train the new PO to do this. But fortunately for us, our previous PO didn't go long. He's actually now the boss of the new PO, so he should help. In the end, this is work that I have to do as the Scrum Master. I have to make sure that he follows the plan that I want him to follow. Or to get him into the mindset that he wants to follow this idea, or get him into the idea that he has this idea and he wants to do it. This really is different between teams. I cannot stress that enough. I'm not saying that this is the perfect scenario. We can have teams that do nothing of this and they work completely together. Should you break that just to tell them to do stuff like this? No. You should not. I don't think so. Teams can be really different. People are really different. But I will do my best to keep this on track because there's a lot of good stuff there going. But again, this is hard. Getting people to do stuff they might not want to or don't understand, that's just up for me to get them to do it. I don't have a better answer. Sorry. Okay. Yep. Thanks. Yeah. 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 Because it is. um, I would say getting a developer to document is always hard. I mean, and I think the problem is I've been a developer and I can write documentation, but I'm not sure that anyone else can read it. I'm not even sure that anyone else can read my code. I'm not sure that I can read my own documentation. I've found code that I've written and just, what is this? I'm going to refactor this. Oh, I did this myself. That's the way we developers think most of the time. A lot of what we have been doing and worth mentioning is that when we are documenting, we are adding as much as possible of video or animated GIFs. So we have some documentation about how to do something, and we just say, hey, we started recording stuff and trying it out, and then some of the developers started using this GIF animation. Okay, here's how this new functionality works, and you just see it. It's maybe 5 or 10 seconds, so you see it really quickly how it works. And if you have kids, they're the YouTube generation. When I need to know something, I'd go to YouTube. I like to see interaction. I like to see video. We're trying to incorporate that to document too. I think that's a really good point to use. Okay, so I think I'm good. I hope you're good. Thanks.